Welcome to the Empowerment Show with Melissa Heisler. Every week, discover new personal choices with practical, inspiring guides. And now, here's Melissa.
Welcome to the Empowerment Show. I'm Melissa Heisler, empowerment coach at It's My Life, and it is your life. Live it. Today, I'll be talking to Dale Spencer about overcoming adversity in your personal and professional life. Welcome to the show, Dale.
Thanks for having me here.
We are excited to have you here. You have an amazing story to share with us. Can you tell us a little bit about the life-changing event that you had?
Sure. If you notice, I'm in a chair. But I haven't been in this chair all my life. In fact, the first 20 years, I was a very active, able-bodied person, and I made a lot of decisions not understanding the consequences of those decisions. It was about 1988. It was December 2nd. It was the weekend right before finals, and for my junior year over at NIU. That's Northern Illinois University. Mm-hmm. So I was with some friends. We ended up taking a break from studying. We went on a scavenger hunt to help our pledges, and then from there we actually went on our way to a party. Now we did all this on foot, and we took a shortcut, and that shortcut had consisted of going on some railroad tracks, somewhere nobody should be at any time, but we thought at the time, no big deal. Again, didn't really understand the ramifications. So about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, my friends and I were kind of spread out on the tracks. I approach a railroad trestle, and for those who don't know what a railroad trestle is, it's similar to a bridge, but in this instance, it was a set of two tracks, no barriers on the side, and there was actually an opening in the middle. And what I was doing was I was walking on the tracks, and I slipped on one of the wooden ties, and I fell in between the tracks. Oh. And it was about a 4-story drop.
Wow. And so at that point, what happened?
I think what my saving grace was the fact that I was conscious, with the exception of falling. Mm-hmm. I did land in a river, but it was only about a foot deep. Okay. I looked up, and first of all, I had to process the whole concept of one moment I'm looking down at a railroad track, I blink my eyes, I open the eyes, and I'm laying down on the ground with the tracks far above me. So mm-hmm. I knew there was something definitely wrong. So then I fell for my legs, completely numb. So I knew I was in trouble. My first instinct was to call out to my friends.
Okay, they didn't see this happening?
It was a poorly lit area.
Okay.
And we were spread out, and I knew that they really couldn't see me, so I screamed, so they had to follow my voice.
Oh, okay.
And they finally found me. I told them what happened, and they knew I was serious. And so what they did was they went to a nearby house to use their phone to call, 911 ambulance coming over in minutes to make sure that I'm taken care of and being brought to the hospital.
Okay. And were you in a lot of pain at this point, or was the adrenaline going and you didn't really know what had happened?
At that moment, the adrenaline was going, and I think it was in shock too. Right. All I thought in my mind was, I'm in trouble, I need to get out of it, I need to get better, I need help. And the paramedics approached me. They asked me some questions, and based on the answers that I had given them, mm-hmm. they knew I had sustained a very serious back injury. So just to be very cautious, they put me gently over a flat board. Okay. And then they collared my neck, and then brought me to the ambulance, and then brought me to the local hospital.
Okay. And what point did you realize that your fate was going to be this chair versus being a healthy college student?
And that sounds like a simple question, and it's a complex answer. Okay. Because it's a gradual mindset over time. And from that hospital, I was brought to a level 1 trauma center by helicopter.
Oh, wow, okay.
And in this case, it was Northwestern Memorial. And the reason I had to be transported immediately is because that local hospital didn't have the facilities to take care of my serious injury. And I'll never forget this. I was in the helicopter, a female paramedic was taking my vitals, making sure that I was stable. Well, she was also administering this pin poking test. Mm. Simple, just poke to see where the sensory level was and where it ended and began. Okay. Well, I demanded that she do this every couple of minutes, because at this point I'm thinking to myself, it was just a major shock to my system. I'm going to get better, and the feeling's going to come back. Well, the closer I came to Northwestern, it didn't move, and so the more bleak my situation became. Okay. So it started to set in the fact that this might have been a little more severe than I originally anticipated.
Okay. And so you realized it too. It wasn't something somebody told you. You were starting to go through
Yes.
and
Exactly. So I got to the hospital. They immediately sent me for a battery of tests, exams, x-rays, and it was conclusive. I did have a spinal cord injury. Now what happened was when I fell, I landed on my feet and snapped my back forward. And the T12, or in other words, thoracic 12, that bone smashed into the spinal cord.
Okay.
And so to this day, there's no cure for spinal cord injuries. Well, they had to send me to surgery ASAP because they needed to get that bone out of there and replace it with bone fragments from my lower left leg and my right hip. And what they did was, and it was about an 11-hour operation.
Oh, wow.
So they put the bone in there and they fused two 12-inch titanium rods, one on each side of my spinal column. In fact, I have them to this day.
Wow. So they were able to at least rebuild that area.
They could
so
fix
there
what they
wasn't
could.
more damage.
Correct. Not only that, but the rods had made certain that that bone would not move and that it was immobilized while it was healing.
Okay. So at this point, you're pretty much as good as they can get you. Luckily, there was no damage above the waistline. That you were, mentally clear. There wasn't any damage that way. Or
I'm shocked the fact that I had no more internal injuries. That was
Okay.
I had a slice in my head and a minor wound on my shin, but other than that, that was the bone. But
Okay.
what a bone to break,
Absolutely. So, and before this, were you the athletic type? Were you on the move?
Always on the move, very athletic. I was in baseball and wrestling. I did a lot of sports, and I did horseback riding. In fact, I was in rodeos. I just did a lot of really fun athletic things. I knew how to train my body to make sure that I was in the most optimal shape, but that's nothing compared to what I was going to go through after that surgery, because this was uncharted waters.
Right, because there's a lot of physical rebuilding using different muscles to be able to move around like you do now.
That's exactly what it
in
is.
your vehicle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was it like coming back to quote unquote the real world?
Well, it's the real world. It was about 2.5 months after the injury when I got to the hospital. But during that portion of my life was very enlightening in the fact that there were different types of rehabilitation that I had to go through. Most of it was physical. So what I had to do, my injury is from my hips on down. So from here on up, I have all my muscles. So my end goal for being in rehab was the fact that I had to be independent. Build my upper body to compensate for the lower body. The weights, the nautilus, the swimming, the range in motion, stretching out to make sure that I'm able to be in tip-top shape to use these as both my arms and legs. Beyond that, because it's not all the working out just to look good in public, I always tell my audiences that. It's purely for practical reasons. I mean, think about it. When the course of the day, from the moment you get out of bed, the moment that you go to sleep, I had to learn how to do things differently. Getting up out of bed, moving my body from the bed to my wheelchair, or putting clothes on. Clothes, and actually the first time, it took me 45 minutes to put my clothes on. So we're talking about, shoes, socks, underwear, sweats, and a shirt. I was unbelievably frustrated because I'm not the most patient person in the world. I really wanted it done yesterday, not today or tomorrow. So I had an occupational therapist that helped me through this process. Do this over and over and over to become the most proficient you could at that individual task. So an able-bodied person, many of the things that they do during the course of the day, it's second nature. You don't really think about it. You just do it as part of your routine. For me, it was a laborious task, everything that I did, from washing my face to brushing my teeth.
And that's a good comment for a lot of our listeners, is that there's a lot of things in our life that we take for granted.
Oh, yes.
And and then the other side of it is also the perfection of it. Of anything we want to become good at.
Correct.
It's going to take that again and again and again for us to get good at it. And in your situation, it seems like a simple thing. And there's a lot of things in our life that seems like a simple thing, but it may take us a long time to actually perfect it.
We're always having room to improve with our lives, but we have to use that mindset to really focus on it, no matter if it's a rudimentary goal of making sure my teeth are flossed, and I know that sounds so simple right there, to the most complex goal to have your company build upon its inception to the success of your business. And so there's a certain structure that I have gone by in achieving any of my goals, no matter how easy or complex it is, and it all comes back to rehab, some of the things and the practical purpose of getting from point A to point B. I always look upon that experience, and that's why I said before that, you know, it's a 2.5 month time where I've really enlightened myself as a human being through many different experiences. Now, mind you, I did a lot of this work on my own, but I'm not going to pat myself on the back. There's a major support group behind me. I have family and friends that have my back the whole time. And you cannot be successful on your own. You always need that help. And I learned that through this experience.
Right, and that's part of, I know you wanted to be very independent.
Correct.
After this, but there's got to be lines as well, as far as, for all of us, of having our community, of having that support. We're not meant, and I think this is maybe a mindset in the U.S. that's a little off, we're not meant to do it completely by our own. You know, if you think about just getting food in our mouth, we need that farmer to make the food and the driver to drive it to our house.
That's a good point.
You know, so we are still a community, and it's important to do everything we can do for ourselves, but then also to be open to receiving the help. And was that difficult to be able to? Humility
was a huge part of my rehabilitation process. Remember I said that physical part of it was a big part of my success in getting out of rehab, but there was also a mental and emotional aspect too. I've always been that type of person that I'll do it myself. I don't want anybody else's help. It was a learned process to understand that even though I'm going to be independent, and that's my end goal for rehabilitation, that I'm going to need help from people to bring me up and down stairs. I'm in a car. I drive all the time. When I go to a specific place that's not wheelchair accessible, I don't complain about it. Maybe that's just me being quirky. What I do is I want to get to that point B. So I have the cell phone, I call whoever the owner of the establishment is or whoever the manager is there, and having them help me up those stairs if it's not accessible. Or if I'm having friends with me and you know, I need to go to a washroom that's not specifically accessible by wheelchair, they would be waiting for me outside to make sure nobody else comes in to interrupt, private time there. So, yeah, simple stuff like going to the bathroom, I have to think about all the time. Now it's 2014. Back in 88, 89, the ADA, American Disabilities Act, didn't even take place yet. It wasn't enacted. 2014, many places are accessible, but we have I think we're a little bit spoiled in living in the Chicago metropolitan area that is such a progressive city when it comes to accessibility, that I've traveled to other places and other cities that they didn't have that accessibility. And so I'm on the phone all the time needing help from people that are there to help me up those stairs. Again, adapting my plan. If I'm not going to be able to get there, plan A is out the window. What's plan B? I'm always looking for that other plan to get through that challenge, to get through that barrier.
Right. One of the things that you talk about to groups is to talk about embracing life's challenges.
Yes.
And this seems like a simple challenge, but a very important challenge to you. What are other things that you talk about when you discuss embracing life's challenges versus kind of thrown in the towel, I guess?
Well, you know, I have been through an interviewing process of different people that have overcome challenges or overcoming fears, whether it be death or divorce or somebody getting fired or somebody actually to be successful. People are fearful of that success and how they can get to be successful. I always liken it to one of my biggest fears I ever had in my life. And I can go into more depth, but the Cliff Notes version of it, I'm a keynote speaker now. My biggest fear when I was growing up was talking in front of an audience. Sounds kind of wild, huh? Well, when I went back to NIU, I had an opportunity to talk into a class about my own situation, about the intimate details and such a personal experience that I went through, what my life was before the injury, what happened, the transformation from the hospital to rehab, transition from rehab to home. And so in doing that, and this wasn't a regular class, this was a lecture hall with 650 people.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to the class, 30 seconds into it, I didn't get that blanked out feel that, oh my God, what's the next word I'm going to say? I got this indescribable feeling that everybody is on the edge of their seats trying to grasp the next word I'm going to have to say, and that's how attentive they were. And so something burst inside me that I'm like, this was so irrational for me to even fear of what people were going to do if I started explaining something. So I knew that it was something that I was on this planet to do, is to help people, but I didn't know what vehicle it would take until much later in my life.
Exactly, and I think that's exactly the reason you had that connection. There's two things I think that really connect people, and one is our stories, and the uniqueness of our stories, and the passion of it, and the mission, and how we can educate other people with our stories. And then the other thing is what you touched on, is that for some of us, it's our purpose to share our stories, to be able to, through our experiences, help other people grow.
Absolutely. I am part of a program, and I've been in this program since 1994 called Think First National Injury Prevention Foundation. Think First is a curriculum-based program that goes through all our high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools, basically K through 12. What we do is we talk about preventing spinal cord injuries and traumatic brain injuries by making sound decisions in life. And so part of the program that we present to the high schools and middle schools is having a speaker such as myself share that story. Now, when I first did it in '94, I had no reason why I was there. Maybe it was self-therapy, maybe it was just to help out the organization, maybe it was just to help out a charity. But the more I got into this program, I knew that purpose in my life. We all have different purposes. Mine was, I needed to pay it forward. I needed to educate our youth for making mature decisions throughout the course of the day. Not only the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but anything that you do as a person. And I felt that sharing my story and not having that education throughout my school system, then I'm able to pay it forward and let them know and keep those nuggets in the back of the mind of, like, with the seatbelt safety and the bike helmet safety and, you know, all of that good stuff.
Absolutely. I think that's some of the lesson that I love to teach people as well. And the two things you touch on are awareness. Yes. I think a lot of times we go through our day and don't even notice what we're doing. And so first having those awareness, and then making sound choices. You know, so there's always choices you can make.
Yes.
But if you're not aware of them, you can't make them.
So true.
It's a great lesson that you're giving to people.
Thank you.
And I know another topic which is dear to my heart that you talk about is real versus imaginary fears. And can you touch on that a little bit?
Wow, real fears. Well, imaginary fears, I touched a little bit about the what ifs, if my audience didn't like what I had to say.
Right. That's
a huge thing right there, and I was able to overcome that. When it comes to real fear, you know, death's a huge thing. How do you work with that when you don't have somebody that's close in your life anymore? And how are you going to live on? Like, you know, our parents are getting older, and, you know, God forbid something happens to them. How do I react, and how do I move on my life beyond that? And so, again, that's why I think it's so important to have such a support group to help us through that process. We're all going to go through some type of fears, whether it's rational, irrational, personal, professional. It's the way that we act and the way we problem solve and critically think that to really get us to move on.
And so is that where you come at with fears? I know a lot of people talk about, well, just ignore or dispel your fears, and it sounds like you kind of go through them.
Yeah, over and through.
Over and through.
If the barrier's way too high, then I'm just going to bust right through. I've lived that life for so many years, and I feel that many people are being held back from success in their personal professional life because of these fears, and whether it is people that are just not willing to reach out and get some help from other people, and they're just going to deal with their life the way it is, and having the difference between having that mediocre attitude rather than a world-class attitude. Right. There's a huge difference, and that separates people.
And one of the things Martha Beck says, which I think it's such a great illustration for fear, is that she calls it the ring of fire.
Okay.
And that we always come up to the ring of fire and, oh, it kind of singes a little bit. We don't want to touch it. We're afraid of it, you know, and we back off. Well, if we keep doing that, you go up and you get singed. You go up and get singed. You're causing a lot of pain to yourself. If you just ran through it, you'd be done with it.
Yeah, if your life is just comfortable, then that's fine. You can just live with your life and being complacent and so forth. But if you want to get to that next step, you want to get to that next level, prepare to be uncomfortable. Simple as that. It really is.
That's a really great point, because I think that's what keeps people from addressing their fears.
Agreed.
Is because there needs to be. It's everything in life goes through some discomfort before
Absolutely.
they're reborn, before they move forward. I mean, birth is not a cakewalk. You know, you look at that as like the ultimate, change and
exactly.
And it's well worth it. I think we'd all agree. We're pretty happy to be here, but it's not necessarily easy.
No, and I tell my audiences, just prepare to be uncomfortable. And I try to be as interactive with them as possible to really get them to walk in my shoes and walk with my journey and how I got from where I was in the hospital, being completely dependent on everybody else, to having success in my life and where I'm going through for now, and not seeing those barriers in front of me, seeing what's beyond that. It's huge.
It's absolutely huge. And I know that you talk not just about personal fears, but you talk a lot about fears in business.
Yes.
And how does that look different? Does it look different? And how do you address it?
Good question, by the way. In the professional, many people go through the day not really, understand of what they can accomplish. They're working in their business instead of on your business, especially our self-employed people. And we always have to, there's a huge philosophical difference between the two. Do you deal with your minutia on a daily basis and not knowing and understanding what your long-term strategic goals are? You have to have that in your mind all the time. That long-term plan of where you're going to be in that 1 or 3 or 5 years is always got to be integrated into that daily plan. A lot of people are fearful of what's going to happen in that year, or 2 years, or 3 years, with whether it's the economy, whether it's a possibility that they're going to get fired from their job, or somebody that's self-employed, how are they going to pay for their monthly nut, like their mortgage payment and car payment and credit cards and so forth, and not really putting those building blocks into place to bring their business to the next level. And so I teach my audiences practical ways to do that. Now, I'm going through that experience myself. I am a keynote speaker. I incorporated in 2012. The inception of my business was in February of 2011. And unlike the rash decisions that I made in my younger life, I wanted this to be very well thought out. I talked about the support group before. Support group being listening to the experts, those successful national keynote speakers, the best-selling authors, people that built businesses in different industries from the ground on up and how they became the titans of the industry. I want to hear those ideas. I'm not all about reinventing the wheel. The information's out there already. Maybe you call me a looter of ideas, maybe you call me an innovator, I don't know, but I wanted that business to have those proper building blocks. And so I'm always concentrating on those strategic long terms because I have those systems in place. How do I use those systems to my advantage to build that business to the next level?
Yeah, and I think it's remembering is how I usually say it, is that,
yeah.
There's a lot of people out there with knowledge. They just happen to get there first. But I think we have some of that knowledge ourselves. We just need to reactivate it. And then I agree with you as far as, and whether this is your career or whether it's your own business, is you have to have a vision. If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there.
When you look at any decision that you make on your business, it's got to originate from the mission statement and your vision of where you want to bring your business. And that's what every business decision should be based on, are those two concepts.
Absolutely.
It's a why. It's always a why. And that's how I started my business, is why am I doing this?
And I just saw a really great TED Talk the other day.
Love TED Talks.
Love TED Talks. And it got to the why not only being important for the business, but going back to when you first started speaking, that your why was to share your story. Your why was to help others. And that's what people react to.
I didn't think about that for years about the why. I just said, okay, I'm sharing my personal story, I'm helping people out, I'm paying it forward. That's great. Well, when I started this business, that mission statement is to help people and pay it forward and share my story and make people feel comfortable with their fears and people to get motivated and people get to the next level in their personal and professional life. That was my why, and that was that foundation.
Absolutely, and that's what people respond to. That's what I'm responding to right now. I can see that you have a
Cool.
passion both to help youth, to help them make better decisions, to help them to hopefully value their life, not take for granted some of the things they might have right now.
True.
And then also to give hope to us adults who are trying to still go to the next level. I think a lot of times there's a complacency, or the more we have, the more we fear, because the more we fear of losing. And so our fears are different, but they can be greater as adults than children. And so you definitely have a great message to share with others.
Thank you. Thank you.
And if somebody wants to have you speak to their school, to their company, to their group, how can they get a hold of you?
So there's a couple of ways. I have a website, which is simple, www.dalespencer.com. That's DALESPENCER. And then you can find me on Facebook on my public page at Dale J. Spencer. And I blog and I do newsletters and really get them information. I'm starting to tweet now, so that's a whole new concept for me. Actually tweeted that I'm going to be on the show right before
well,
this.
excellent.
So see if we have any new followers.
I hope there are some, because I think you've got a really great story to tell. And yeah, social media is such a great way. It's such an exciting time to be able to share our stories in so many different ways.
It's huge, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Dale, you are definitely an inspiration.
Oh, thank you.
You have such a great outlook and such a great purpose, and I'm so glad that you are here today to talk with us.
I appreciate it. Thank
All
you
right.
for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And if you want to talk more to Dale, you can check out his Facebook page, or you can write a comment at facebook.com/The Empowerment Show, or tweet at twitter.com/Empowerment Show, so we can keep this discussion going.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you.
Bye.